You know, with how terrible the world is nowadays, I feel like I hear the phrase, "this is why we can't have nice things," thrown out a lot more often now. And I never knew what some of those nice things could be. But when I saw this, I just knew this is one of the fabled nice things everyone talks about. It's been over a week, and I'm only just getting over the post-Grand Festival depression. It's so rare that an event like this comes along that really unites everyone who appreciates a shared sense of art, because that's what this really was, art in its purest textbook form. The Grand Festival was a celebration of culture, what happens when you take chances, and above all else, it was one of those nice things that we so often can't have. So, let's talk about why! First off, I want to talk about the environment. As soon as you load into the Grand Festival, we're treated to something that we've never seen before in all of Splatoon, and that's a living, breathing hub that's outside of a city. Throughout the last 2 years, Inklings and Octolings alike have been constructing the Grand Fest Arena, composed of 3 stages: the Urchin stage, the Seashell stage, and the Giant Clam stage. Now, obviously the developers have worked on this project, but I do want to delve deeper into the environment of the actual Grand Festival, because littered throughout the actual venue that's sort of like a mock Coachella, you can see little jellyfish camping out, you could see vendors vending food, and you could see other Inklings and Octolings attending the event, including longtime series characters like the DJ of all DJs and producer Oct Deadfish and Captain 3, among some others. Looking at the festival grounds, you really get a sense of scale, seeing all the different vendors who are selling merchandise and food to everyone around, and it really fleshes out what the festival grounds could be inside of this world, right? Because you not only see the characters like I just mentioned, but also vendors who of course would take up their stake at the chance to make money at a sort of festival like this. So you have Jellyfish selling Mexican food, DJ Octavio and Captain Cuddlefish selling merch from other bands, and you have representatives of the 3 bands that are on stage selling their own merchandise. And of course, everyone around the festival grounds are wearing these wristbands, which are sort of just a cool collectible, and I really wanted one, so I got one. There are really just so many details around the environment that really sells the fact that you are part of Splatoon's Coachella, essentially. And the developers really put time to making sure all this felt natural and it gelled with all the other elements that were in the world. I especially like the robot ramen shop because it had a robot making ramen, and there was a little ramen bowl outside the actual shop that looked like the Robo Ramen stage, which I just thought was a cool touch that they didn't need to actually put in there. Among some other details that they also didn't need to put in there, but kind of leave me wondering what the future of Splatoon could be. There was a little food bowl outside of one of the venues. I forgot which venue it was. I think it was the Seashell stage, and you could see a little food bowl with little paw prints, which makes me think that it's Judd or Little Judd's food bowl that they didn't include in there. Maybe it's something referring to Little Judd in the future of Grisco. I just thought it was really cool. And there's a ton of other small details, like every other artist in the game that's not part of the 3 bands that are on stage, putting their signatures all over the signage as soon as you load into the Grand Fest, right next to the bus that dropped off all 3 bands, which I thought was just amazing to put there. There's also a reference to Commander Tartar and a million others that I probably missed. Like, I know for a fact I couldn't find Lil Buddy the Small Fry anywhere in the venue. I didn't know until I looked online that they were even at the venue. I don't know if it was just my poor luck or I just wasn't as observant as I could have been. I don't even know how the Little Buddy got to the remains of the rocket ship from the end of the story mode campaign, but they're out there somehow. Overall, I just really liked perusing the festival grounds. I liked looking at every detail, soaking it all in as you actually went to go to the performances. I think it was one of the best things they could have done to add to the grand sense of this festival being nothing like the previous Final Fest Splatocalypse or the Final Fest from Splatoon 1. It was just nothing like we've seen before, and I don't really know where they go from here in terms of the detail in the environment. But I guess, you know, the next game is going to be on Switch too, so they can really do anything. They were very smart with how they displayed everything in the festival grounds, because there's a fairly linear path but they had put so much detail into everything around that path that it doesn't feel linear at all, right? They even put the 20th Century Studios giant Grand Fest logo right there. There was just photo spots everywhere, and it was great to see. And as you go around the festival grounds, you just hear the music slowly coming in as you approach each of the stages, which was just, it was electric. I don't know what best way to describe it other than it was electric. I got the feeling that I was at an actual concert going to each of these stages, which is, I think, is a pretty big accomplishment as someone who really likes going to concerts. I remember the first time I actually went up to a stage, I didn't know what to expect at all. So when I actually approached each of the stages, I didn't even know till they started playing that each song was a live rendition and remix of each of the songs that had been present throughout the last 3 games, which was just wild to see. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm gonna switch paces and talk about the music. The music in the Grand Fest was more than I ever could have asked for. I thought when we were getting teases of what the Grand Fest stages would look like, that they would be maybe somewhat isolated in terms of where they were put inside the actual venue, and maybe you had to enter a building and like hit a loading screen and then they would play a song, right? Maybe there was a barrier, but having them all be in tune with the environment really added to the festival aspect of the event, right? It wasn't just a concert as you saw on the giant clam stage, but it was a festival. I keep reiterating that, but I think the point is true whenever you're going on the grounds to hear all the new renditions that we're playing. And on that subject, I want to talk about how smart it was that the live renditions that we hear are from the IRL live Splatoon concerts that were held, which I think is such a great use of dumping their choreography into the actual game so everyone can experience them, because I'm fairly sure not even that many people, relative to the amount of people that play Splatoon, are even aware of the concert's existence, much less have actually seen the concerts in person. Putting them into the actual game for the Grand Festival was not only just a smart thing to do to preserve those performances, but add to the grandioseness of the Grand Festival. It just blew my mind that all these songs were playing that I have heard for the last 9 years, all in the same venue, all at the same time in one festival area. It was just amazing. Hearing Ink Me Up and Muck Warfare just sent me back, and hearing a live edition of Till Death Do Us Part just like blew my mind. Hearing all of these songs back to back in the actual venues was just astounding, and it really gave it that concert feel that they were trying to go for. They just succeeded and threw it out of the park, and they hit it out of the park. I can't even speak, but it was just an amazing time. I think one of my favorite parts of the Grand Festival, barring the different performances for each day of the Grand Festival, which is a note unto itself, was the actual giant clam stage. The first time I actually approached it, I didn't know how large it would be, the scale of the venue, but I walked down the actual hallway, and the first song that was playing was Spicy Calamari Incantation. It was just beyond anything I knew was capable for the devs to do for a single Splatfest. I just sat there and my mouth was agape, and I was in sheer wonder of how they could even pull something like this off. The giant crowd of jellyfish headbanging and waving their wands at the stage was just not something I thought was feasible or able to be done inside of this game, and it really brought everything together. That's when I knew I have to take so many pictures using the actual photo feature, and I did. And just seeing everything around the actual venue it was the best thing in the world when I was actually experiencing it. And I touched on it before, but I think it was so smart to put the performances from the actual live concerts into the game so everyone could see them, and just seeing the performances that they made in person on these stages, along with giant screens, somewhat like Coachella, just brought it all together. There was so much unity in every aspect of the Grand Festival that made it feel complete and like something that was supposed to be special. I think this is the perfect opportunity to talk about something that went through my head I couldn't quite grasp during the Grand Festival. I can't understand why Nintendo or the developers of this game cares so much about the culture and appreciation and artistry of Splatoon, of all things. This is why I think it's a nice thing. Like, I cannot fathom how something like this can even exist. And now I think it's the best time to talk about the new performances that were in the Grand Festival. I specifically want to talk about the second performances, that being the Three Wishes performance. One of my favorite things in the world is when you're going to a concert and you're in the pit, you're maybe a little sweaty from the opening acts, and there's just music playing over the radio as the crowd just sits and waits for the main act to show up, right? You might be there for an opening act, you might be there for the main act. But regardless, the energy that you feel when you're in the pit, when the lights turn off and the main act comes on stage, no matter how they do it, no matter how they play it up, it's always the best feeling in the world when you're in that crowd and you feel the energy of everyone who's excited to see them. You don't know everyone's stories with the people who are on the stage, but you feel that energy coming out of them, right? It's one of the best feelings in the world when you're in that crowd, to me. And so the first time you load up the game, Splatoon 3, on the second or third day, and you walk out to the giant clam stage after passing the empty seashell stage and urchin stage, you don't know what you're in for until you walk out into the pitch black giant clam stage and the lights turn on and all 7 idols are on the same stage, united to play Three Wishes. I don't think there's been a game that has made me have chills in such a positive way than the developers of the game when they made that moment during the opening of Three Wishes. It took something that I love in real life, and it took a video game that I love, and they merged those two things together into such a unique moment that I don't think can ever be recreated in another medium that's as special to some people as is Splatoon, which has its own culture, it has its own lore, it has its own story, and it had its own build-up of music being important and integral to the themes of the series, right? So when you have a game series that's lasted for 9 years as of now, of story, character, lore, but also appreciation, and the climax of all of that pent-up energy is a concert, much in the way as you can experience it in real life, I thought was just such, not a profound moment, but such a moment that is very rarely built and can be built for the people who appreciate that piece of art. I don't know if that moment can ever be recreated again for me. It didn't give me quite the same energy as maybe a crowd in person, but it didn't have to. It was just the fact that that moment was created and that moment existed, and the people who made that moment cared enough to even allow an event like the Grand Festival to exist in the first place, which really was impactful for a series that you care about. Around my second, third, or fourth listen of Three Wishes, I couldn't get out of my head how I couldn't understand how the developers or Nintendo cared so much to even put on an event like this in the first place. It astounded me. It befuddled me. It confused me. Like, why do they care about something that we care about? Companies don't do this. They're not supposed to care about what they make, but they cared about the art that they made and the effort that they put into it because they took a chance on a dying console to make an experiment of a multiplayer shooter that was Nintendo's own branded way of making a massively online multiplayer game. I don't mean an MMO that just came out, but something that would appeal to the masses, but also had that Nintendo level of care and polish under the surface. It just turned into something that was so much bigger than they originally intended, that the developers were allowed to care about and put their all into, even if they were rushed during very short development cycles for the first couple entries. It was just something that shouldn't have existed on the platform the first game existed on, but has flourished into its own beast and one of the most popular Nintendo properties that's relevant today, and I can't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't think I ever will understand it. I just remember 9 years ago when I didn't have a Wii U, watching videos on YouTube of the Squid Sisters play Maritime Memory and thinking I wanted to play that game. I wanted to be in that story and see those characters, and then Three Wishes happened and I couldn't understand why it's come this far. It just astounds me that someone in the company cares so much to push an event like the Grand Festival forward. The reason why I'm getting so up in arms and in my feelings about this is because the idols and the culture of Splatoon inside of its own world represents so many people and cultures that exist in the real world that are not just nondescript or corporate, but have such personality and influence from real world cultures that so many people can see themselves in, and they're represented fully and they can be attached to the characters that live inside the world of Splatoon. So when it feels genuine, I can't help but make a note that they tried to make something special and succeeded, and it's so rare when everyone else just tries to copy each other in the current realm of games, movies, or even TV shows. It's just mind-boggling that this is such a rare occasion, which I don't think can ever be recreated by someone else or Nintendo at this point. The way I sort of see Splatfests are a celebration of the different cultures of the world when put up against each other instead of a frivolous debate match that's settled through turf war. And not only is it a celebration of people, but a celebration of maybe how far those people have come, since Splatoon is all about carrying traditions forward, even if it wasn't even yours to begin with, since a lot of the culture of Splatoon comes from humans. Sometimes when they look at Inklings or Octolings, it's a reflection of how far I've even come in my own life, and I feel like the Grand Fest really changed how I view that and its tone, because now I feel like I'm up in arms about it instead of sentimental about it, because I'm just so baffled about how they care so much to even represent those facets of humanity in their own game. If I made a video talking about how sentimental I was about Splatoon before the Grand Festival, it would have had a completely different tone than right now, where I just don't understand. A few years ago, I saw a video essay by Constantly Caden called You're an Adult Now, and it was sort of describing how they grew with Splatoon. Splatoon sort of represents the growth of not only you as a human, but how you perceive yourself and how you tackle different objectives. And I resonated with it so much, I think about it all the time. I haven't seen it since it came out, and it had like 4,000 views, but it's a really good video essay. I'm gonna rewatch it. I didn't want to rewatch it before this because it would sort of skew my thoughts on the Grand Festival itself, but I feel like I associated my feelings with that video essay way more with how I thought about Splatoon until the Grand Festival. It made me upset how much they cared and how this was a nice thing. We can have nice things if people just cared. Someone cared, and I appreciated that. So I'm not quite sure about Splatoon's future at this point. The Splatfest itself was past versus present versus future, and regardless of the outcome, I think it's a very interesting choice to make a Splatfest 4. Not only considering this was done in one of the previous Splatoon games, but also it sort of represents how we feel about time. This game is a culmination of a trilogy. It's the third Splatoon game, which has 3 hubs, and it has 3 teams for a Splatfest. It seems like a very calculated choice by the developers at Nintendo and behind Splatoon to call this the Grand Festival instead of the Final Festival for this game compared to the other 2 games, because I think they knew if they called this festival the Final Festival, it would have had a different tone to it moving forward and looking into Splatoon's own future. It feels like this game really united so many of the aspects of Splatoon, all the characters, all of the music, the celebration of that music and culture, that I think they're really setting up for a new outlook for the series, and maybe even like soft rebooting the series with completely new idols and a completely new direction, while still keeping the same gameplay at its core. The outcome of the Splatfest was so interesting because though I was on Team Present, Team Past won, and I think that speaks to how people not only are afraid to let go of the past, but how they still appreciate what came before. That decision might view the developers into maybe maintaining the characters and world that they built so far, and I hope that they do. Though I hope that the series moves in a new direction, and I think that's what Splatoon should be at its core, something that always stays fresh, not to make a Team Past joke. I think that they should not discard what came before, and especially not deep cut, because I feel like deep cut was underserved in this game. I hope they get some amount of story or more character work in the next game. Earlier I said the Grand Fest was art, and I really mean that, because art isn't just something that is made to be poignant. It's made to connect to the people who are viewing, interacting with, and observing whatever thing is created. And I'm not going to jump into the subjectivity of art. I think when people make concerts for digital squid people that we all sort of rally around and cherish and fight over what side should win in a frivolous debate that we should appreciate it nonetheless. Splatoon's future is really looking bright, and I think ending off the Grand Fest with special performances for the last 2 hours, I think sells the fact that they are looking forward to making more Splatoon, that they didn't, just shoot their shot with the Grand Festival and they sort of want to restart on the series. I think they know that we love these characters and we love Splatoon as a whole, and I think they know that. Even though Splatoon likes to stay fresh, it still likes to look onto its past to see what it could do to grow, just like we do. I just hope that in Splatoon's future that it keeps the same spirit, not only for the appreciation of culture, but the appreciation of people who interact with culture and art. Past did win, so I think we have a pretty good chance of that happening, but I just hope to see more Splatoon in the future, because after all, Splatoon is incredible.